multimedia artist, and I am really looking forward to tonight's program. So before we start, I just wanted to say, make sure to tune in to BPBC's website and social media to keep up with the rest of their fundraising campaign for the month of June. There are a lot of fun experiences that are coming out around the United States, so be on the lookout. So today for the masterclass, I'm going to present on the topic regarding the power and beauty of process. And there's a few different things that we'll be talking about and how that relates to our existence as people. And then there's a small little group activity too. So make sure to have a little piece of scratch paper or a marker and highlighters in order to participate. So let's get started. I'm going to move this chat. Okay, so the power and beauty of process. Let's start with the question of what even is a process? What's great about processes is that there are so many different definitions and ways to describe the way that it intersects with our lives. A process can be a continuing natural or biological activity or function, so something that happens in nature. A process can be a series of actions or steps that are taken in order to achieve a particular end. They can also be a natural phenomenon that's marked by gradual changes that eventually lead to a result. They can be an integration of sensory information that's received so that an action or a response is required. A process can also be a performance of a series of mechanical or chemical operations on something in order to change or preserve it. It can be something that's handled through a process or an established routine, well, obviously a process, but through an established routine set of actions that give a result at the end. And what's really great about processes, and even really beautiful about process, is that they are everywhere. They are within us and within our environment, and they're within every aspect of our leisure and of our work. And to me, and something that I have been challenging myself to remember, is that choosing to see the process in everything can encourage inspiration, allowing us to recognize the beauty and power of living. So, where are these processes? And as we said, they really are everywhere. They are, in the homes of caterpillars, they are in our ovens, they're in our hair, on our scalps, between pages and fields, behind the sink and in front of a mirror. Processes are everywhere. And again, if we choose to see where these processes take place in our life, it can encourage us to stay inspired and seek the beauty and seek the power that is within each of these processes that intersect with our lives. So who am I and what's my process? So I wanted to kind of break this up into a couple different scenarios, just because I'm still young and still going through different processes, but I have a little bit of hindsight, and so I can encapsulate some of them in different types of groups. So my early process, I got into music kind of around the age of 7, where I started taking piano lessons. But with me, I was a little rebellious and wanted to figure out how to play the piece without looking at the score, and even more so, I wanted to be able to play my own stuff. So I only took it for a year. But that was super formative for my process, early process in becoming a composer, which I didn't know that's what I was going to be either, and didn't even know what a composer did. So another process is when I got to middle school. That's when I was introduced to Team EA. I grew up in Texas, and so I did that Texas Music Educators Association hang, both in middle school and in high school. And that's when I started taking voice lessons and started really writing some other songs I would never share today, but things that still count. And then when I got to high school is when I really delved into the whole music scene, especially with Team EA, doing solo and ensemble. I was super nerdy about music, and also was like the choir co-president. And I also did improv, that picture at the very bottom with me faking to take a picture is from a skit that I did while in high school. I totally did all of the a cappella stuff, and that was like the rise of Pitch Perfect like fandom too, so that was definitely there. And also when I was in high school, I sang for our marching band for their state competition for UIL. So these processes were foundational and very important to just starting the foundation of what I was going to become, and then the processes that came next. Part of that process was singing, like singer-songwriter arrangement kind of things. So when I was in high school, I did all of these singing Valentines with our choir, and we would sell our singing Valentines at lunch. And my little entrepreneurial spirit wanted to be able to sell out. And so something that I wanted to do was figuring out how to market to different people, like teachers and singers, so that both people would want to buy and would want to hear us play. And so what we would do is like MASH songs, which was also super popular at the time, hence Pitch Perfect. But I would do some arrangements and then accompany us on guitar. We wouldn't write anything down, which is crazy now to think about it. We would just say a line and then do it by route. But this process of bringing like different genres together and people together and singers together of different backgrounds and different like interests and intrigues was also a really important process to lay the foundation of who I was going to become as a composer. As you know, today as a composer, I still really enjoy bringing different genres together so that I can bring people together and different listeners together. So as an example of one of these processes, which is kind of cringy now, which is so funny. I haven't looked at myself being in high school for a couple of years, but this Singing Valentine is an arrangement of Frank Ocean's Thinking About You. And I won't say I'm in love from Hercules, because at the time our choir was going to Disney World. So this is this arrangement.
A tornado flew around our room before you came. Excuse the mess you made. We used it as a rain in Southern California, much like Arizona. My eyes don't shed tears before they fall. I'm thinking about you. You know, no, no. I'm thinking about you. You know, no, no. I'm thinking about you. Do you think about me still? Do you? We're getting that thing so far. I thought my heart had learned its lesson. It feels so good when we start out. My head is screaming, head of river. Unless you're dying to cry your heart out. You keep denying who you are and how you feel it. They can run a fight. They feel like a grown up when you try to outrun you from nothing but taking a chance and only I will take it. No, you're told you want you to live. Taking a scheme only I will take it. Taking a chance and only I will take it. You change the rain. Taking a scheme only I will take it. No chance, no way, I will take it. Taking control, you know, no, no. This seems no way, I will take it. At least out loud, I won't say I'm in love. I've been thinking about you.
Yeah, So just to shout out those performers, we had Catherine Saller, Madeline Gagne, Anne Luquette, Nikki Maldonado, and Cindy Satish, who are all still my friends today. So again, this is another example of being able to bring these genres together and figure out how they fit with different voices. And it was a really important process for kind of developing and setting the foundation for my listening and hearing as a composer. So the next kind of phase of my process, I kind of labeled intermediate process, only because it was only a couple years ago. But this is when I started my undergrad, and this was such an important part of my process. So I went to the University of North Texas for my BM in composition, and this is 18-year-old Mason outside of Bruce Hall. And here is when everything kind of really started, as far as like getting the ball rolling and figuring out who I was going to be as a composer and what I wanted my sound to be. And I loved this experience so much. And something that was really important to this experience was the different types of ensembles and different types of music that I was writing. At the time, I was doing an early music ensemble / Baroque ensemble, and that's where we had actually performed at the Boston Early Music Festival. As a composer, I was really into sound design and film scoring as well. So I liked being able to write an original score for a piece, but also be the person that can also do sound design and Foley art, so that it was kind of like a one-stop shop when collaborating with people. I also did a vocal jazz ensemble, and we performed at the Denton Arts and Jazz Festival, and I got to practice doing arranging, and we happened to win a Downbeat Award that year too, for that year, which is exciting. And additionally, I did choral music and did kind of that tradition also. And something that's really interesting with hindsight now too is the way that all of these things synthesize. And I would say that this is really the main area of my compositional career and process where all of these things started to come together, or I was starting to practice or realize how I could bring them together. So for example, with some of these ensembles that I was in, I would have rehearsals with each one back to back in a day. So I'd start the day with my early music ensemble, then I'd go to vocal jazz, and then I'd head downtown Dallas and do like a choral gig there or rehearsal for an upcoming gig there. And something that was interesting was, for those of you that know, with standard tuning, A440, and then not standard tuning with early music and like the Baroque period, having to go from a non-traditional tuning to the regular tuning, but being in vocal jazz where you have to be in tune or you're out, then going to like a choral or regular sacred kind of choral tradition gig and having to be able to hang in each space, be in tune in each space, but be informed in each space. So like, it was really interesting to come from an early music rehearsal and go to vocal jazz and kind of switch my listening and frame of mind as a performer and how I was engaging with each group. Then moving towards going to the choral tradition, and sometimes even some of the works we were singing were more operatic, so having to engage my voice in a different way. So all of these experiences were really important to benefit the other. So very grateful for those. So these next few examples are ways that these processes have manifested. And the first one is film. So I really enjoy visual art, and every day I'm trying to find ways to employ other visual aesthetics into some of the music that I write, whether I'm capturing them with my camera or collaborating with other visual artists in the area to bring our art together. So this example is a class project that I did while at UNT under Dr. Drew Schnur, who is my composition teacher, and he taught a film class there. And this project was based on the idea of Mickey Mousing. Mickey Mousing in film scoring is an action where you accompany all of the movements that are in a film. Usually it's in animation or it's in cartoons. So any of those old Disney cartoons or movies where you see someone fall and you hear a sound, or every rise has a sound, every fall, every thump, every flop has a sound. And it's really fun to figure out different ways to accompany that. So this small film, again, it's a class project. It's not a film that I produced. So it was merely for this project, and it's called Dust. Yeah, so that was that project. I loved being able to work on that one. And I love being able to collaborate with other people within film because it's different every time. And this process was really fun because I got to find a way to employ some of my jazz background, but then also some of my compositional background as far as like instrumentation. So figuring out how to make dust have a sound. Dust doesn't have a sound, but when animating it, the celesta, or finding other like twisting and granular sounds that can Mickey Mouse that action. So this process is so fun. I love each start of a process with film because it informs the next collaboration in film. So the next process, while being in undergrad, let me check this chat so I can get everyone. Let's see. Oh, okay, we might have an audio issue. Let me just share. Okay, so the next portion of this process was working with an a cappella group. And this was super fun because, as you know now, I loved a cappella music in high school. And again, at the height of the whole Pitch Perfect like craze, I loved being able to engage in this way. So this project was a collaboration with UNT's pop vocal group called the UNT Green Tones, and I collaborated with my friend Isaac Yuri, who's a wonderful creator out in LA now. And this is a cover of Somebody Else by the 1975, and they won the 2017 Sing Texas competition with this song, and actually got to work with Deke Sharon, who is very popular a cappella composer with Disney, and they got to open for one of the sets in Disney in Fort Worth. So I'm just going to make sure really quick that audio is good to go.
So I've heard you found somebody else, and at first about you with somebody else.
Don't want you being with someone else.
Our love has gone cold. You're intertwining your soul with somebody else.
Don't want you being with someone else.
I'm looking through you while you're looking through your phone, and then leaving with somebody else.
Oh, being with someone else.
No, I don't want your body. I just hate to see your body with somebody else. And come on, baby, this ain't the last time that I see your face. Yeah, come on, baby. You said you'd find someone to take my place. No, just don't believe that you have got it in you, 'cause we are just gonna keep doing it. Every time I start to believe in anything you're saying, I'm reminded that I should be getting over it. No, I don't want your body, but I hate to think about you with somebody else.
Don't want you being with someone else.
Our love has gone cold. You're intertwining your soul with somebody else.
Being with someone else.
I'm looking through you while you're looking through your phone, and then leaving with somebody else.
Being with someone else.
No, I don't want your body. I just hate to see your body with somebody else. No, I don't want your body. I just hate to see your body with somebody else. Forget that getting money, oh, I can't give you my soul, 'cause we've never.
Yeah, so that one was a lot of fun too. The percussive stuff is also a cappella. They totally killed this one, and it was super fun. And something that I really learned a lot from this process was the more that I was able to make this fun, the more that I was able to actually go and meet with the performers and ask what they liked and what they didn't like about a cappella music, what they wanted to contribute to a cappella music, and what they wanted this piece to be a part of their brand. Allowed them to feel free and liberated enough to like totally kill this music video. I had no idea that they were going to present it this way, and they totally killed it. So really liked doing this process. Okay, and then also another thing, and this will lead into another part of our presentation, but while being at UNT, I was able to collaborate with a myriad of different musicians and collaborators. There were a lot of different house shows. The house show scene was super fun, of different genres and backgrounds, and a lot of different collaborators within each house. The same as far as like jam sessions or hangs and stuff like that. I really liked being able to go out to those, in addition to getting wine with my like classical major friends, or going to go get wine with some of my opera friends, or cast parties and stuff like that. It was just a very diverse scene. And so with this process, I was able to employ some of my rock background. Growing up, I really liked listening to rock, a lot of alternative, a lot of like Smashing Pumpkins, a lot of Soundgarden, a lot of Metallica. I just loved all of that. And so with this, I was able to employ it in one of my pieces for my senior recital, which we'll be presenting in a little bit. This is a snapshot of a piece called Zeus, and the performers are Mills Chaikin on guitar, Tyler Kaiser on bass, Alex Soros on drums, Ethan Dithart on guitar, as well as Roger Hunt on guitar. This is a snapshot of Zeus. so that one was a lot of fun. And again, this is another example of figuring out how this process intersects with some of the other ones that I was doing at the time, and then figuring out how to encourage my performers to feel liberated enough to give so much in their performance. I remember when we were doing this concert, I'd asked them, like, what do you want your look to be, or what do you want to wear? Because it's based on Zeus, who's the, he's in charge of like the lightning and the water and the thunder and all of the Greek mythology stuff. And they were saying, we talked about denim and having everyone wear denim, and there was like a blue light that was going to flash on them, and then at the very last chord, the lights were going to change and flash to show lightning and thunder. And so when they did that, they just totally blew out this like back half of the piece that's not in the score, but they felt compelled to do it, and I loved it, and they totally brought down the house. So another example of how processes can intersect, and figuring out how to go deeper and deeper and deeper in that process with the people that you're playing with. So that leads me to one of my favorite processes that I've ever done, was my senior recital when I was in my undergrad. So when I started this process at the time, I was really into Greek mythology, and I was reading basically I was just trying to catch up on my knowledge, because my knowledge was based on Percy Jackson, which is not really knowledge. So like I really needed to figure out a way to know what I was talking about before presenting all of this music that was based on these themes. And so when I read some of these books, there was one that was talking about this Greek festival called Thesmophoria. And Thesmophoria is a celebration of Persephone, who's the goddess of spring, and her mother, Demeter, who's the goddess of harvest. And if you don't know, that story is based on, it involves Persephone, Demeter, Hades, who's the god of the underworld, and Zeus. And so Reader's Digest version, Persephone was sitting in a field with her friends and frolicking and picking flowers, and then Hades came up from the underworld and stole her and kept her down into the underworld. And so there was a negotiation struck up by Zeus and Demeter with Hades, and they basically agreed that Persephone could spend half of her life in the underworld and half of her life above the ground, which is not really a deal in my opinion, but that's what happened apparently. So I really loved that whole story. And when I was reading all of that and then reading about Thesmophoria, I wanted to find a way to physically demonstrate that, visually demonstrate that. Thesmophoria is a festival celebrated by women, and they are celebrating the story of Persephone and Demeter. And in their celebration, they have this long processional, pun intended, to this tree where they lay laurels and flowers and other types of gifts and symbols of offering. And I loved that so much. And I was able to kind of pick apart all of those things and figure out how to employ them. So part of the Thesmophoria festival with processing and then bringing a flower, we didn't have a tree to really process to, but there was a theater and I could make a makeshift altar. So I reached out to some of my friends in the opera department who I had just done Figaro with and Dialogue of the Carmelites, and asked if I could borrow some of those flowers from Figaro and borrow some of the set pieces from Marriage to Figaro. So in that middle to top right corner, you'll see the pillars in the back that have all the flowers. We also borrowed that banister, which was from Sondheim's Little Night Music. So it was fun to be able to collaborate with those friends and have them so willing to offer these things. Another thing was figuring out how to create this immersive listening experience. UNT has this really awesome theater, as you can see in some of these pictures, and there were just so many elements that I could play with in order to support the narrative. So to create this immersive listening experience, it was figuring out how to tell a story a lot of different ways. So there wasn't just music for acoustic performance, there was also short films where I curated different visual aspects and then wrote music that fit the film score, but then I also collaborated with a poet who happened to be the wife of one of my choral directors, and she had all of this poetry. Her name's Catherine I.W. Sparks, and she had all of this poetry based on Greek mythology and based on all of these characters that I was writing pieces for. So it just worked out that way too. So not only are you getting performances that are live and for acoustic setting, but you're also getting these other like short films that are in between that support the overall narrative. And then of course, set. So I feel like when I was doing this process, when I brought that banister in and everyone saw that there would be Greek columns and like, I also had incense in there for a short moment, but I took it out because it's a fire hazard. But like I was really trying to make it an immersive listening experience. When doing that, I felt like my performers were really encouraged to bring more of themselves because the environment was heightened and elevated, and they were able to just bring more of their musicianship. So I really liked that part of this process. Another idea relating to process was, how do I keep a narrative going? And so again, as I was saying earlier, like how many ways can I tell a story? Can I tell a story through film, through spoken word, through bringing different genres together by having different types of music? So there, was solo works, there were chamber works, there were duos, there was a piece for choir, there was a lot of fixed media and short films, and then a piece for like a rock band. So everyone was able to get a little something from every piece that was on this concert. As I'm kind of keeping this idea of bringing listeners together by way of genre, by way of sound, by way of visual aesthetics. Another thing is sensory elements. So in addition to the whole incense kind of thing, we also had a Greek feast afterwards. So there was dolma, and there was like all of these different types of foods that related to this mythological world that we were in. Another thing is thematic ideas. So I had to figure out like, okay, how am I going to tell this story and make it concise and make it direct and have the trajectory as clear as possible? And the way that I was able to do that was to create a series of character pieces. But these character pieces weren't the same, obviously orally, but also like instrumentation and the way they were presented. So as I said earlier, short films, duos, trios, rock bands, spoken word, you name it. And then lastly, my favorite part of this process, which I still kind of carry with me today, is how can I wear my process? And I am really delving into that because I'm super into fashion and I love being able to partner with other photographers. My roommate is a photographer and we love coming up with different photo shoot ideas and like concepts. But as a composer, when I have my music out there, it's really cool to figure out how can I wear my process so that it encourages some type of conversation. So for all of the like marketing and like marketing promotional material, I had this dress and I happened to have fake lavender in my bathroom. And I had a friend of mine named Lorraine, who's a wonderful photographer, but an incredible poet too. She was just published with the New York Times, Lorraine, if you're watching. And we found this like Roman column that was on TWU, Texas Women's University's campus, which is right around the corner. So we took all of these pictures and we were able to really capture the essence of this idea of goddess of spring. So all of this was so much fun. And if you've been hanging with the BPBC crowd for a little bit, at the very bottom in the red is Daniel Murray, who's one of our bassists on this team with BPBC, and he played Hades. And an example of that is, the program notes, as you can see in some of these pictures, were projected, and we were able to employ different colors for like different pieces. And it was just so immersive and fun. But speaking to how to like encourage your performers to give more and want to collaborate more, when Daniel saw the set and saw that he would be cast in like this cool, glorious red, evil visual, he was like, great, I have red suspenders. And he popped those out and then totally killed the piece. So this was such a fun process. So just also as a little snapshot. Yes, Daniel, we love them in the chat. So this is a small little video that captures basically the essence of what that concert looked like, with people coming in and laying flowers at the altar, and then all of the visual art, yada, yada. So this is a snapshot of Goddess of Spring. again, another little kind of snapshot of how all of these processes came together. This was, again, one of my favorite processes, just because there were so many different elements that I got to bring together, a lot of different genres and a lot of different people to bring together and figure out how they can also benefit from the company they keep while being a part of this performance. So that one was really fun. Now, to kind of shift gears and get a little serious, and kind of a reality check, sometimes processes have to change, and that's okay. And what I mean by that is, when I was a freshman in college, I was coming back from Christmas shopping and I got in this crazy car accident that was very life threatening, and it caused me to lose the 2 fingers on my left hand. I just started my college debut as like a musician, and it was absolutely devastating. And it was really hard to work through because I had to ask myself, like, as many questions as you could imagine. Is this a sign that I'm not supposed to do music? Am I ever going to be able to do music again? And then I had to go through figuring out, how am I going to play all of the songs that I've never played in front of people? Some of the singer-songwriter stuff I did, I couldn't play anymore. I couldn't play my songs on guitar. I couldn't play my songs on piano, and I couldn't compose in the normal process that I had. And it was really devastating and terrifying. However, as we said earlier, now that I have hindsight, it's totally way easier to say now. It wasn't easy to say this while going through it, but choosing to see the process in everything that you do encourages you to stay inspired and keep seeking the beauty and power in everyday processes. So my everyday processes changed. I could not do like my curly hair. So I had to have my hair straightened all the time because I literally could not touch it because of how sensitive my hand was. I had to take a semester off of piano and go through physical therapy. And I had to take off my bandages every night and take a stitch out until all of them were out. It was horrid. But as I said, now that I have hindsight, it's way easier to say this. As I was in it, it was really rough. But choosing to see the beauty in everything, choosing to see the process in everything, allows us to seek beauty and power in our everyday processes, but eventually and ultimately the beauty and power that's within us. So this video is a little graphic. It does contain a picture of my hand after the car accident. It's a little healed, but just as a caution. But growth, we love to see it. It's
I
important.
sent my dad a video because I could not do this for the life of me, but I can make the tabletop.
Tabletop.
Yeah.
And make the fist.
And I can make the fist, kind of, not really, but I can make
No,
it.
those words do not speak in here. No, and not really, and I can't, and
Yeah, I had the best physical therapist. She was so nice, and I wasn't while going through therapy. So I'm just grateful for the people that were in my life that were able to help me get through this. But then, in addition to this, it wasn't just getting through it because my hand is still this way. So figuring out how to bring that process with me and figure out a way for it to benefit who I am. So now we're going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about how to start a process and how to build one. So I got this concept from while I was in my grad program. I was invited to do a workshop with Brazilian artist Luciana Souza, who is one of my favorite jazz artists out there. And she came up with this concept called the Artist's Dome. And it stuck with me, and I will forever say this and credit her. She's awesome. But in that workshop, she said, okay, I want everyone to take out a piece of paper and I want you to draw your artist's dome. And then she drew a picture of a cartoon version of herself, and she drew or listed the things that were within her artistic dome. Or, if you're not an artist, what's in your environment that inspires who you are, and capture it. Obviously, you can't capture everything and say everything, but I encourage you to figure out how to make it very personable to who you are. So if your favorite color is purple like mine, make your dome purple. If you like plants, put a monstera in there. But also figure out, like, who are your artists that you like? What are the books that you read? Do you cook? Do you go for walks? Whatever it is, capture it in here. And then we're going to share them. Don't be nervous or anything like that. It is casual out here, but if you're too nervous, I made one too. So to accompany these 3 minutes, we're going to listen to the first movement of one of my pieces for cello called Persephone. The first movement is Vision of Persephone. So take these 3 minutes, and if you want to do it without your camera on, that's totally fine, and we'll regroup in about 3 minutes. See you soon. All right, everybody. So for those of you that are in the Zoom chat, would anyone like to share their artist dome? I'm going to stop sharing so that we can go back. Yeah. Anyone like to share theirs? If not, I will share mine. Don't be nervous. Don't be scared. No pressure. If not, I'm going to share mine. Hold on 1 second. So just in general, this is like a great exercise to be able to practice doing this and figuring out like, okay, what is my process? Can everyone see my presentation, by the way? Great. Okay, so this is my dome. It's a little crowded and there's way more stuff that I could probably put in here. But I think it's important to reflect on all of who you are as a person when making this dome as an artist or just as a human being. In my dome, there are past versions of myself. This picture of me right here with huge hair is on my first day of my piano recital. And also, you know, my interests in photography and the books I read. Right now, I'm reading The Language of Flowers by Vanessa Diffenbach and The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Also, the music that I listen to. Led Zeppelin 2 is actually the first CD I bought for my first car. So it's like really important to my artistic dome. And right now I have really been listening to Blood Orange, and his Negro Swan album is amazing. And then also I love old school R&B. So Diggable Planets is also a group that I really love to listen to. My dog Duke is in my artistic dome because he brings me so much joy. Fashion's in my artistic dome, and photography and that collaboration. Cooking, my parents and the way that they love each other has informed myself. Strong Black women in my family and Black hair, long walks, and then also my traumas and my triumphs. I think it's important to always figure out a way to be mindful and reflective of the things that you go through and the processes you go through or have to change in order to become who you want to be. And then also Brandy Norwood is definitely in my artistic dome because I wanted to be her. I wanted to be Moesha. So yeah, one of these triumphs that I was mentioning earlier is me being able to play bar chords again. With my accident, this is a little graphic too, but this finger was gone also, and they put it back. But it was the most sensitive and I couldn't move it. And I didn't know if I was ever going to be able to move it again. It was so painful. But as of recently, I was able to return back to my guitar and play Spoon Man by Soundgarden, which is one of my favorite groups in high school. And it's important to put those triumphs and some of those traumas and lessons in your dome.
I sent my dad a video because I
Lag with that video, but yeah, it's important to be able to capture everything. When we show up as humans, we show up in our abundance and we show up in our lack. So it's important to see all of who you are so you can bring all of yourself to your artistry. So what's my process now? I'm still figuring that out too. And it's really fun to keep figuring it out. I think that, you know, I'm still very young and still figuring out what my career trajectory is and how I'm going to evolve as a composer. But if I can constantly keep asking myself the right questions and how they relate to process, I feel like there's longevity in that and spontaneity and curiosity and all of those things. So something that I'm employing in some of my process now is my photography for scores. I'm also a vocalist and performer, and something that I wanted to kind of either change or brand within myself was having some small little snapshot that was appear into my life as a composer to give context to the performer. So recently I just had a commission with the National Association of Teachers of Singing, NATS, and the Cincinnati Song Initiative as well. And this song for soprano and piano called Songs for the People, the picture is a picture of my dad and my cousin Julian on Christmas Day in 2020 when it was scary but joyous but scary. And the text of that song, Songs for the People, is a poem by Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, and she just talks about the joy of music and the healing of music and the congregating of people and returning to some type of community. So I really enjoy being able to take some of these photos and employ them into my score. Another thing is photo shoots. So photo shoots with the Annalise DeBay, who's my roommate, is an incredible photographer and such a curious mind. And she is also an actress and does comedy and stand-up sets, and she's just such an interesting person. And so it's so fun to collaborate with her and come up with concepts and take the pictures. Not these pictures obviously weren't going to be the ones that I put in any of my scores, but it's really fun to be able to like take on a different personality with fashion and makeup and photography and scenery to stay inspired. Developing my piano skills. So these purple little prosthetics here, I forgot to mention this earlier, but part of that process of getting through that time was figuring out how I was going to reclaim my space as a performer and as a composer. And I composed a lot using the piano. So by the grace of God, there was this group in Houston that was an amazing prosthetics team, and they were able to help me craft a prosthetic. And I'd asked for them to be purple because for me in my process, I didn't want to have something that was like flesh colored and looked like my hand and having to continually take it off and remind myself that it was something that I was lacking. And instead, I wanted to be empowered by having my prosthetics be purple and be in the shape of the actual piano kind of position you have to put your hands in. So that's another thing I'm kind of developing. Hair, right now it looks like this, but back then it looked like that. And I love changing up my look and figuring out, again, what different personas can I take on? And with this, you know, with these different instances of hair, it's like, how does this person, if I were to have this hair, how does this person walk? How do they run? How do they sing? How do they dance? How do they move? It's just another way to like keep staying inspired. Recording soundscapes. This is a picture of my two dogs. The one on the left is Pumpkin Pie, and the one on the right is named Duke. And we were at Galveston in this picture. And I took out my camera and I brought my Zoom recording instrument and just captured those sounds. And also had my camera and was able to take pictures there too. So being able to kind of make like a mood board of different environments and scenes and feelings and emotions and stuff like that is very helpful also. And then last but not least, cooking, which is going to lead us to my next part of this presentation. And then also album listening days. If you're interested, this album is by an artist called Baby Father. He is a South African artist who moved to London, and this is his BBF album with DJ Escrow. So speaking of cooking, one of my favorite processes as of late was my master's recital, and it was called The Intersection of Music and Food. And with this recital, I was able to figure out a way to record the sounds and music we make while cooking, and then also write original music for acoustic setting and bringing those two things together. So here's a little snapshot of that.
Recipe and score. Ingredients and instrumentation, cookbooks and masterworks. These items are comparatively different, but share a similarity in the way they are created. They also share similarities in the way they are enjoyed amongst company. Music and food share a history that isn't explicitly detailed. Rather, it is shown through context clues hidden in iconography, fables, and treatises. Wait, but how does music and food really relate? Like, really? Genevieve Teal and Antoine Hennion describe taste as a performative action in their article, Discovering Quality or Performing Taste. Taste as a performative action characterizes people into groups, especially those who share similar tastes. Genevieve and Hennion explain that taste is a way of building relationships with things and with people. It is not simply a property of goods, nor is it a competence of people. More specifically, both authors identify 3 different relationships associated with taste. First, perception can be considered as a juxtaposition of 2 determinations, social and material. Second, taste can be analyzed as the result of the influence of external factors that act on the sensorial perception of a stimulus from a product or its interpretation. Finally, taste can be studied as the result of an oriented temporal process shaped by habits, experiences, and socially and culturally constrained or constructed learning. End quote. This description of taste mirrors a musician's experience. One's perception of music can be influenced by an external stimulus or a social aspect. It's like the scrunched faces we make when hearing a really good guitar line at a house show versus savoring those scrumptious stretches of cheese when enjoying a slice of pizza. There are also funny coincidences found in recipe and in score. They share similar properties, a list of items to be paired, separated, deconstructed, or to be used in a non-traditional way. Both are adapted over time to modern standards, and they both are meant to be practiced, annotated, celebrated, shelved, frustrated with, and memorized for a final presentation. George Kenaway expressed a similar sentiment in his article, Bookcases, Fish Pie, and My Piñata, Musical Scores Considered as Sets of Instructions. He writes that recipes and musical scores show different levels of specification, and that annotated performing editions are essentially transitional texts to be discarded of once the performer has evolved their own concept of the work. Because of this similarity in practice and performance, historians and musicologists are able to compare the dates of these recipes and scores, and maybe compare the specification of both. Do more complex meals happen to share the same location and time period as their musical counterparts? Is there a dish specific or popular to a place where there is also a precedent method of counterpoint or theory? Kenaway's research encourages musicologists, historians, and theorists to search in unfamiliar places for this relationship between music and food. Gioia Filicamo's article, Hungry Women, also speaks about the beginning of music and food's relationship by writing, quote, "Taste and smell, sight, hearing, and touch. Preparing elaborate food and polyphonic music requires active connections across all five senses. Creative cross-references where both mouth, connected to food or singing, and hands, to prepare food or write down and perform music, are essential." End quote. The music of tonight's recital addresses these creative cross-references, with music written for acoustic performance that is then combined with the sounds we make while cooking, thus presenting the intersection of music and food.
Yeah, so with that process, it was a lot of fun, and it was fun and stressful because it was also in the middle of a pandemic trying to figure out how to get all these sounds together. But this process of figuring out how to bring these sounds together was a lot of fun. Okay, and then the last part of tonight's masterclass kind of expose is another part of this process. So one piece that I had written while doing this master's recital was based on Rossini's macaroni and cheese recipe. I found out in my research that there were a lot of instances of composers being interested in cooking and their recipes. Hildegard von Bingen has a cookie recipe, and there are practicing nuns in Germany that still make those cookies. And I watched this video of nuns like putting these cookies in the oven, doing a Vesper service, one of Hildegard's Vesper services, and then coming back and the cookies being done and then them enjoying them. So it was just a really interesting process. So this one is based on Rossini's macaroni recipe, and it's called Stock, and it's written for classical guitars and electronics. All right, yeah, so that was Stock, and that was a lot of fun. If you caught it, there was a little quote from Barbara Seville in there kind of thrown around just to give a reference to Rossini. So that is the end of my masterclass, and I wanted to leave everyone with a little something to take with them. So this quote is from Joni Mitchell's song Amelia, and it's from her Hajira album. And this is an album that I had on one of those album listening days back in college, and it's one of my favorites. And she has a line in there where she sings, "People will tell you where they've gone, they'll tell you where to go, but till you get there yourself, you never really know." And that stuck with me forever. And the song like resurfaced before I had moved to Boston to start my grad program. And as most of us know, with moving and starting a new school, it's stressful, it's scary, it's exciting, it's happy, it's sad, it's a lot of different things. But I think this quote just really relates to process. The more curious that you can be about who you are as a person, and that is outside of just being an artist too, can help you figure out where to start with the process, or a new one to start, or one to change, or one to reconsider. Again, being able to choose to see process in everything allows us to be able to seek beauty and seek the power that comes with living, and the power of choosing to have a process. So with all of that said, go get that process. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I also wanted to open up for any questions, either from Zoom or from YouTube. If not, I have a whole, we do have questions. So question, the film footage, did you shoot this yourself? Sorry, may have missed that. And can you talk briefly about the bubbling imagery with that looks like dye or paint? Looks absolutely stunning. What an interesting and unique decision to use guitar quartet. Also, is there a place where we can watch the whole recital? I had to miss it when it was live. Yes, thank you for all of those words in that question. So I'll start with, some of the imagery that I had from this recital, a lot of it I shot, but with stock, I used a lot of stock, if you know what I mean. So there's this website called Pexels that has free footage. And so as long as you are able to, quote the person that's using it, or being able to give a credit to the person that developed the film, you were able to use it. And so I definitely lucked out, because those shots of like the bubbles, the shots of the bubbles were fun. Some of the like pink imagery is literally from a lava lamp, but it goes with some of the idea of like brewing and bubbling and gurgling. So I just added some of those in there as well. And then it says, also, is there a place to watch? Yeah, so my recital is still up on YouTube. If you just search the intersections of music and food, I'm trying to multitask to see if I can put that in there, but my recital is still up on YouTube, so you can still watch from there. Let me put that in there. Thank you for your question, and thanks for watching. It was kind of fun to like use some of those lava lamps imagery. It was a lot of fun with music and food. Okay, putting this in the chat now for sharing. One moment. Okay. Oh, great. Okay, link is already there. And Jeanette says, I initially thought stock was in reference to soup stock needed for the dish. Yes, it is. So with Rossini's recipe is actually very layered. Who knew he was like such a connoisseur? But that stock was used to like boil the noodles for the macaroni and cheese, and then you make it. And I actually made it for those performers. So our first rehearsal, I had like made the dish so that I could pitch the concept and kind of get them, even if they didn't want to do it with the food, if you know what I mean. So like, that's what was part of the process too. Another comment is, you talked earlier about your relationship with different tuning systems as a performer, traversing jazz, early music, and opera. Have you incorporated microtonality in your compositions? If so, how? If not, do you have plans to? Big fan. Ross, great to hear from you. So I've never actually done microtonality. It's something that I'll be completely honest of and that I'm a little intimidated by, just because there are so many great composers out there that are able to use it in an idiomatic way, in a very organic kind of way. And so something that, even as we're talking about this idea of process and how things shift over time, that would directly correlate with working with microtonality. And I wonder, you know, because it is kind of on like a granular level, like figuring out what the visual component of that could be too. So it's not something that I've done, but it's something that I am intrigued by, but I am a little intimidated by. So maybe I will employ that in the future. Also, link to the recital if you're interested in watching Intersections of Music and Food is in the chat in the Zoom. Yeah, so if there aren't any other questions, I just wanted to say thank you so much for everyone for tuning in and everyone tuning in on Zoom, and also in the YouTube chat. Just to also plug some of BPBC's upcoming events. I know tomorrow, if you're in the New York area, I think it's Brooklyn. I've never been to Brooklyn if I'm getting this wrong, but Prospect Park, there is an event going on tomorrow with BPBC. Okay, someone says I'm right. Great. I don't know why I thought it was in LA, but anyways, Prospect Park, new music. Some of the music that is with this team and this team of composers is going to be going on in Prospect Park if you're in the area tomorrow. And again, thank you so much for watching and coming today, and stay tuned with BPBC and everything they're doing on social media and everything else. Thank you for watching. Catch you later.